Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints, back with some more pre-season FPL content. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. Or if you want to buy me a coffee, the link is pinned under this video. In a recent draft that I did that gained a fair bit of traction, I showed you that you can get Mohamed Salah and Haaland into your drafts, albeit with an unorthodox 4-5-1 formation, and have a balanced team. But I also mentioned that I didn't consider that formation optimal, and I would favour a 3-5-2 formation. So it got me thinking, can I do a 3-5-2 formation, not only with Mohamed Salah and Haaland, but also with the other big hitters in my mock squad as well? And I think the answer is yes, I can get all of the big hitters in and do a 3-5-2 formation. But not only that, I'm going to set myself a parameter here whereby I only pick one player from each club. So without further ado, let's get straight into it and construct this 3-5-2 formation draft. And to get us started, I'm going to have Gehi in my draft, but I'm going to cheat slightly here because at the time of recording, he's heavily linked with a move to Newcastle United. So for me, I'm going to pick him in as one of my Newcastle United assets. So you can see there, the balance is already taking 4.5 million away with Gehi as that player. And it basically means I'm locked in from getting a Gordon or an Isak with the parameters that I've set myself. But I will revisit those two assets at the end of the video as an alternative to what I'm showing right now. So Gehi is the Newcastle United defensive cover, and that means that I can in fact have another asset from Crystal Palace instead. And I'm going to have Dean Henderson, who has been in multiple mock drafts that I've done, and also in my actual draft as well. There is talk of Palace potentially being weakened with the departure of Gehi to Newcastle if that gets confirmed, but he's got a reasonable run of opening games and he's 4.5 million. Less pressure to keep as many clean sheets than a 5.0 or a £5.5 million goalkeeper, proven in the Premier League. I think he's a no-nonsense pick in the 4.5 million options there. And that brings me on to my next defender. Again, I need to make sure I've got enough funds available for my attack. So I'm going to keep it relatively budget for my defense, but I also want to show you some of those £4.5 million defensive options as well. So we'll cap it to £4.5 million. And again, Anderson, a very good pick as well, but can't pick him with the parameters that I've set myself. Got Esri Konsa and Harwood Bellis and Barco there as well, but I'm going to not have them as starters. Got Mikalenko, who's got some high ownership there as well in the 4.5 price tag. And then further down, you got Wout Weiss and Van de Ven. Again, if I got Van de Ven, then I couldn't get, like, let's say, Son into the team, which I'm hoping to do as part of the big hitters. So I'm actually going to go for Mikalenko, who last season, just as a reminder, for Everton kept 9 clean sheets, 3 goal involvements as well, reasonable opening fixtures, a couple of red block games as well. So I think he makes sense as a £4.5 million option, and it's someone that was also picked as one of the players in the Content Creators 15 that we recently compiled as well. So in comes Mikalenko, and let's just fill up the remaining sub 2 and sub 1 places actually as well. So Harwood Bellis, who should be a start for Southampton, has some reasonable games in fairness, but I really wouldn't want to start him. I think he's someone that should be almost a go-to for many fantasy Premier League managers this season as a bench option. So in he comes, not as a starter, but as a bench option. And the other one is Barco of Brighton. We've already talked about Estupiñán's injury concern. So Barco could get some reasonable X-mins during this opening period, although I believe in pre-season the minutes have been somewhat limited. So yeah, most likely it's going to start him mid-September if I really needed to, but then Estupiñán could be back by then as well. But Barco is a sub-1 player at the very best. That leaves me with £4.5 million for my next defender, And also I've got the sub-1 goalkeeping slot to fill as well, which I'm not going to go over too much, but with Fabianski as opposed to Turner. Hopefully less of a chance for him to drop to £3.9 million. And we'll just keep it at that. Won't be having rotating goalies, so 74.5 million to fill. So for the defensive options I've got, Van de Ven, not going to pick him. I think Robinson actually is a very good shout. Reasonable opening games as well, but that's going to lock me out of having an attacking Fulham asset, which I'm going to come on to. 6 assists, remarkably, and also had 9 clean sheets. He is being overlooked by many FPL managers, but in this instance, I'm actually going to go for Ezri Konsa, which will lock me out of having an Aston Villa attacking asset, which is fine. So you look at that, 2 goal involvements, 7 clean sheets, reasonable run of opening games, excluding the Arsenal fixture. So I think he is the player that I'm going to go for as my budget option with £70 million to spend. And what I'll do is, just so that it's fairly obvious, the big hitters that we're going to get obviously will be Mohamed Salah and HAALAND first and foremost. So let's just restore HAALAND into the team and just look at the ownership at the time of recording as well, that they are among the highest owned players in the game, which is why we're being forced into picking different players, I guess, or one or the other. So there's HAALAND, £15 million. He's kind of trickier to get in this time around than last season, but looking at the ownership, 42%. It was 30% on the day that the game launched. I'm expecting that to easily exceed 50% by the time game week 1 hits, and especially if he does really well in the Community Shield. So he is there. And then Mohamed Salah, 35.5%, very high owned. You've got Palmer, who's almost 50% owned, surprisingly. So in comes Mohamed Salah. And with the draft that I'm constructing, if I really, really wanted to, I could even get Palmer in, but I'm going to explain why I won't be getting him in. So spoiler alert on that. So with those 2 players alone, who've already eaten up 27.5 million, I'm now down to 42.5 million pounds in the bank. So I did say I'll be getting some more big hitters, and you look at the high owned players. Saka, just over a quarter own him. Reminder with him that he did play in the final of the European Championships, but it seems as if he's getting some minutes in pre-season, and there's a hope that he will start game week 1. 28 goal involvements last season, 26 before that, 20 before that. So you know what you're getting with Saka, and almost a no-nonsense pick with Arsenal. Some tricky games, in fairness, that they've got as well, with Aston Villa away, Spurs away, Man City away. But you'd hope that a team like Arsenal is fixture-proof with their attacking assets. So, yeah, without overthinking it, in comes Saka. Now, this is where the draft will diverge from the 4-5-1 that I constructed, because of course I had Saka, I had Salah, and I had HAALAND. And then at a push, I think I had Anthony Gordon, and then it was getting harder to justify, and then I had no other attacking assets up top. £32.5 million in the bank to fill in those 5 spots. So I did say that with the formation, I'm really favouring 3-5-2. Could easily go 3-4-3 with this, but probably not with the funds left. But I'm going to focus on the 5-man midfield. We talked about Palmer, 47.7% at the time of recording. We got Nkunku, who's less than 20% owned, looks fit and healthy in pre-season, has been getting minutes and goal involvements during pre-season. So I think he's someone who could potentially cover Palmer, albeit might be a tough ask. I'm hoping that on a points per million, the question is, will Palmer outscore Nkunku this season? I think he will on goals, assists, and points. But the question I then ask is that on a points per million basis, can Nkunku get close to matching him? And I hope he can, because he's £4 million less. So that will be one to monitor, but I can't get Palmer. Nkunku is my cover for him. That leaves me with £26 million left to spend, and I need to beef up this midfield now with the options that are available. So I talked about Spurs, attacking team, very poor end to last season. I guess injuries didn't help either. But I'm going to go for Son for this draft. So showing you now, you can get Son, Salah, Saka, and Haaland in. £10 million for Son, 27 goal involvements last season. He is worth the money. Reasonable run of opening games. Yeah, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. He's fixture proof. That shouldn't be an issue for me. And whilst Spurs are fairly leaky in defence, the attacking options will guarantee goals regardless of who they play. So that leaves me with 16 million in the bank. I've already hinted I'm not going for a 3-4-3 formation. So what I'm going to do straight away with this is get my budget forward in. Not really many in the 4.5 category, but for this draft, just get Cannon in, sub 3 player. X-Mins is going to be an issue for all of the £4.5 million forwards, but happy to have him as a sub 3. That leaves me with £11.5 million left with 2 players. Now, what I could do, go for a £5 million or £5.5 million forward to get more in midfield, but the reality is that when it comes to the forwards in the £5.5 million category, okay, you've got João Pedro, but beyond that, Vardy, doubt he's going to get minutes. Fraser, X-Mins, Armstrong might get minutes, but you've got Brereton Diaz as well, so could be an issue for him. Ladapo, minutes. There are literally no options at £5.5 million or less. I'm going for a £6 million forward now. And just as a reminder, I set my parameters here that I want an optimal formation as I perceive it, 3-5-2. I want to get a player from each team. I want to get the big hitters in as well. So I haven't got a Forest player, and Chris Wood for Forest has a very reasonable amount of opening games against Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves, Brighton, and Fulham. So he's someone I want to get in. Concern with Nottingham Forest is that he could have his minutes managed with other attacking options. So that is something that is worth monitoring. But I'm hoping that he can start the season at the very least. If he doesn't, and I've got some bench options that can potentially sub in for him. We've got Barco and Harwood Bellis at a push. But I ask you, look at the £6 million options. The only other one I'd consider actually is Wissar. Time of recording, Tony hasn't moved, but he's highly likely to leave Brentford from all the speculation. You look at the fixtures, Palace, Southampton, then some red block games. So it is a tricky run for Brentford. But literally, you're down to Wood and Wissar. Calvert-Lewin, perhaps, but injuries are a concern. I'm not sure how fit he is. But for the purpose of of course, the other Forest asset there as well. For the purpose of my mock draft here, where I only want to pick a player per club, it's really down to Wissar and Wood. And just because of the generous fixture run, I'm going for Chris Wood as my other forward in a 3-5-2 formation. And that leaves me with £5.5 million in the bank. And there are quite a few options available in this category, some who are completely flying under the radar as well. So let's just go through some of them. I think Mainu at £5.5 million. He's shown what he can do, but then you've got other attacking options at United. So probably wouldn't want to go for him there. Got Rodgers, who has clearly shown his capabilities towards the end of last season and also in pre-season, but X-Mins are an issue for him. Hudson-Odoi, I think, is a go-to player in form. 7 goals, I believe, since February. X-Mins hopefully shouldn't be an issue for him, but for the purpose of my draft, I can't pick another Forest player because I've already got Wood, so I can't pick him. And then we've got Smith Rowe. Recently gone to Fulham and completely flying under the radar. Of course, if he had still been at Arsenal, he probably wouldn't have been in consideration for any FPL manager, in fairness. But then you look at his stats on a minutes per minutes basis, and Smith Rowe over the past 5 seasons registered a goal or assist every 171 minutes played, especially when considering he was a squad player. That's pretty good. He was not a regular starter across those 5 seasons. Now imagine what he can do for Fulham with regular starts. So he's someone who I think could fit this bill for that final spot, and it's the trickiest spot, in fairness, to fill. Alanga, X-Men's issue, got Amad Diallo, looks very promising, especially towards the end of last season. I think definitely an option for a sub-1 fifth midfield berth as well, but we've talked about the other attacking options as well for United. You've got your Rashfords and your Bruno Fernandes options there as well, so that is something worth factoring in. And Garnacho as well. Got Souček for West Ham. X-Mins wouldn't be an issue, and if I'm not mistaken, he had 9 goal involvements last season, but you just look at the positioning for him, that is something that you need to factor in. That is he going to be in those advanced roles in a regular basis for West Ham? So can't consider him, albeit I had him in my first draft. I think Harvey Elliott completely going under the radar, and he's someone who had 12 goal involvements last season. There's an expectation that he'll get more regular starts this season. But again, for the purpose of my draft, can't pick him because I've already got Mohamed Salah. But someone who you should definitely be monitoring. Yeah, Enzo, definitely not. Bob, again, someone who's been getting minutes during pre-season, with Alvarez moving to La Liga. I think he'll get some minutes for sure for those opening games. I think X-Mins could be an issue across the long term, but £5 million as a regular starter for Man City, he's pretty much a cheat code, someone that you do need to factor in. But for the purpose of the draft, can't fit him in because I've got Haaland, of course. Barkley, will he start? Had a really good season at Luton, albeit they got relegated. I think Semenyo could be a bit of a cheat code as well, especially if Solanke moves and if he plays in an advanced role. I think he's flying under the radar as well. But then you look at the number of minutes Semenyo had last season as well. Fair amount of minutes as well, so factor him in. And you've got Longstaff. Again, a lot of these players I wouldn't factor in. Minte, 5.5 million, definitely one to watch. Super differential, but too differential for this draft. You've got a Dingerer as well. So the other player I'm looking to find here was not there. Just trying to get him. There he is. I think Brereton Diaz. Now with him, you're thinking, oh, Southampton, newly promoted team, we should avoid him. But of course, he was at Sheffield United last season on loan. 7 goal involvements in 14 games. If he starts up top for Southampton with regular starts, he could be a cheat code as well. So I think it's a very close shout. And look at those opening fixtures after Newcastle United. Surprised he's owned by less than 0.5% of FPL managers. He's definitely one to monitor, seeing where he is playing in pre-season for Southampton as well. But from the players that I've chosen, again, I'm spending more time on this final slot because I think it's the most difficult one because I want a balanced team. So I'm going to go for actually Emile Smith-Rowe. I think he's got a lot to prove, and he's there for Fulham, should get regular starts as well. And in terms of picking one player per club, I can't do it for Brereton Diaz because I've already got Harwood Bellis. I think Emile Smith-Rowe fits the bill, and that is the budget max out. So budget defense, but it's not like the worst defense in the world. You'd expect regular starts for Mikalenko, Konsa, and Gehi, and if you've got a tricky match with them, or you've got some backup options that have easier games, then you can factor them in with Barco and Harwood Bellis. You've got Saka, Salah, Son, and Haaland in this draft as your power hitters, and then Nkunku to cover Palmer, Wood as Forest cover, and then Smith-Rowe. Now, I did say that I could make this draft even better if I wanted to, if I slightly adjusted one of these premiums. And all I would do is get rid of Son, I'd get rid of Wood, and Then go to Newcastle United. I'd get Gordon in because I now have the extra funds. Again, I'm breaking the parameters here, but just demonstrating that, like, still go 3-5-2 and have further enhancements. And I go to my forwards because I've got 8.5 million in the bank. And then if I can find him, there he is, Isak right at the top. So with this 3-5-2, SAKA, SALAH, Nkunku, Smith Rowe, Gordon, Haaland, and Isak up top, and the same defensive line, you've got to ask yourself, are you going to go for Gordon and Isak, or do you want to go for Wood and Son? And many at this moment in time would probably go for this latter option, but I wanted to just demonstrate that as well, that this variation is possible with this draft. But again, because I set the parameters that I wanted the big hitters like Son, Salah, Saka, and Haaland in one team, I didn't obviously include them in this draft, but in my own draft, I could factor both in. So there you go. That is the budget maxed out with the players that I've picked. Let me know in the comments below if that worked. Have I got the balance right? Have I got the balance wrong? Do you prefer the variations I had with Gordon and Isak? And as always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated.